We have a direct request to them. They then send that asset. Currently, it goes to that sergeant that's on duty at the troop, who then has to make a phone, who then has to come down here, see what's going on. So there's the time for him to travel. He may be up in Griswold at that point. Who knows? So he gets to East Lyme, looks at that scene, makes a determination, calls his lieutenant, briefs his lieutenant. The lieutenant then makes a determination, calls Eastern District Major, briefs him on the operation. Then at that point says, okay, we need the SWAT team, or we need the helicopter, or we need the dive team, or we need something like that. So you've now just added minimal 2 hours to an event where under an independent process, we could make that call and say, hey, we need your helicopter, we need your dive team. And because we request it as an independent department, there is no question. They send that asset down immediately. It'll cut down time. It may take them 45 minutes, but it'll at least cut another hour and 15 out. So there's one of those. I just wanted to at least expound on that a little bit. And again, it all reverts back to state statute. They have to. They have to respond. Those are afforded to everybody. Whether
Thank you. So let's narrow this discussion down to the requirements needed to go from A to B. From resident trooper, what are the things that we need to do?
Okay.
And the things that we took a year of investigating, and let's get that communicated out.
All right. So
directly.
basically, we're tasked as soon as Mr. Nickerson was elected to come up with basically a cost-neutral avenue to go independent, or with a maybe very minimal cost. So what we had done is spoken to Waterford, developed an MOU with them, Memorandum of Understanding. So currently, as we use a state police facility to do our operations out of, whether it's processing prisoners, evidence storage, which would be bulk evidence, not all evidence, an impound lot, things of that nature, we would now have that facility use in Waterford, currently as Ledger does with the town of Groton while their current police building is being built. So however long, if we do make this jump to an independent force, that's what we would do. We'd be contracted with Waterford, kind of in the same respect, just for their facility, though, as far as what we do with the current state police program. There was a large list of things that we had to take into consideration, and a lot of this we had met with the police subcommittee and gave them our findings so they could make their opinions. Some of the things, but not limited to, were as far as staffing, of course, budgetary issues, reports, records, emergency dispatch, rules and regulations, radios, communication system, the collect. And again, collect is that system that we use to run criminal backgrounds. If we pull you over and we run your license, that's the system we run it through. That is monitored and audited by the FBI. So again, that goes back to a dispatch issue, and that does answer your question. Dispatch will have to fall under police control because of that particular function. That's why there is no collect system up at dispatch right now for them to operate, because there is no officer there. It has to be an officer there. It doesn't have to be the chief, there just has to be an officer around there. So at some point, like a normal PD, we would probably incorporate dispatch with the PD in the building. Building upgrades for what we currently are residing in now. Just looking around, statistical analysis and some of the equipment. So these are some of the main categories we had looked at, and of course there is a whole plethora of little subcategories that go with each one of these major categories. So we had come up with a comprehensive year-long investigation, just going out, getting real numbers, real stats, to give you a real picture of what it's going to take for us to make that jump. Can we flip a switch? As the date of June 30th was just brought to us, we don't sign a new contract with the state. Can ELPD flip a switch and make it happen with Waterford under our current operating conditions? So we were tasked with looking into that. It will not take much to do that at this standpoint, but again, as you know, we have the schools on board. At some point, we would definitely want to look at a facility that's probably not in the middle of Main Street that is adequate enough for a department to work out of.
And when you bring the schools up, I'd like to stop you there. The whole thought here is we do have a very large school project that is still being decided, and we're still gathering information, and frankly the Board of Ed is still trying to figure out what they're going to do as a plan. And I think that comes first as a town. I think we need to figure out what we're going to do with our schools. It's a bigger item. This project started at $100 million. They're down to 25 or 30 million now to fix 3 schools. But that we need to figure out as a community and have that discussion of what we're doing to our schools. Immediately after that, we'll start talking about what we're going to do about a public safety facility. Police station, dispatch, and whatever else fits in that building. For the record, Ledyard built their building for about $4.2 to $4.5 million. Montville built their rather grand building, and then, of course, they didn't go with an independent force. They built their grand building for $6.8 million. So it can be done. It can be done in a not an economical way, because those are millions I'm talking about, but we can do it in a way that isn't 12 million or 20 million. And that's the point I wanted to get across. I think it's important to go to schools first, and then we'll be talking about a police building.
So again, at that point, these were some of the areas that we had looked in. Does anyone have any questions at this point as far as we had basically drafted up? I probably have 3-inch wide binders of documentation that we had set and met with the subcommittee with. And I think they pretty much come up with, in its entirety, and again, probably for a different meeting, but we could go hours and hours and hours with information that was given over that time frame.
I think it's probably wiser for the commission, if they have any questions, that they could bring them up to you. Have we covered this? Have we covered this?
Yes.
We've covered everything. We covered it. And then the chief's report that's been alluded to all night, it's about 20 or 30 pages long, put out by the Chiefs Association of Connecticut. They reviewed all our information and kind of certified that we have our ducks in order. We already have a computer system. We already have a radio system. We already have an independent dispatch. We already have 1.5 administrators in their building, et cetera, et cetera. So, we already have police cars. Some towns don't. So we have a lot of things. Again, it is a flick of a switch with a few minor details. That's what this report says. That's what was certified by this task committee. And by the way, I did not sit on the task committee, and that needs to be said, probably on record. I met with them the first night to tell them their charge and give them a task and tell them I need to get it done in 60 days. I'd like to get this thing moving, and I kind of walked out of the room. And they went to work, so that needed to happen. We can have questions from the selectmen to you, and we can go over any items that might be of interest. Mr. Cunningham, do you have anything?
Not at the moment.
Okay. Mrs. Cheeseman?
No, you appear to have been very comprehensive, and as you said, it's your belief that we could make this change in a reasonably timely manner. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Siri?
No questions.
Mrs. Hardy?
It's up to me?
It's always up to you.
Well, I'm ready.
I know.
Actually, are you planning to come forward with a financial breakdown of this for us?
Yes, we have plenty of documentation, things that would need to come into play. And again, you ask one question, which opens a door for many more. So with available grants that will now become available to the town of East Lyme, as Mr. Salerno had asked, with some of the revenues that we now as a town of East Lyme Police Department could generate, could help offset costs of some of these things, like our APHIS machine, which is our fingerprinting machine for when someone comes in for prints, for pistol permit, employment background, things of that nature. So we do have the ability to offset some costs for it.
I think it would be very helpful for us in understanding if you could provide us with a chart, simple chart as to what each of these items might possibly cost. What would be the cost of either promoting from within a lieutenant or captain, whatever title we're going to give? Are we going to hire an outside person and add to the force? Or is it going to be an existing person that's elevated to that position? General cost for upgrades within the building. Is this going to necessitate additional police vehicles? So I think some of the very specifics as to the financial effects of this so that we could make a comparison. I think that the board's very interested in this and moving forward, but we also, I think, want to be certain of long-range costs.
No, absolutely.
For instance, the state trooper comes with a retirement package.
Correct.
We're going to have to pay retirement. We're going to have to pay insurance.
Of course.
And so,
Actually, we pay that now.
So we pay,
We pay the state troopers, we pay 100% of his fringe benefits.
Actually, we're
You pay
at,
the
I
retirement
just
too?
gave Ms. Johnson the current fringe rate. It's now at 97.1%. And as I gave her that fringe rate, because this is for part of the DUI reimbursement grant, I was also told by State Financial that the town is going to incur an over 100% fringe rate because they are going to be charging for back services that they previously did not charge for but did provide. So we're now going to be on the hook, the town is going to be on the hook for that over 100% fringe rate for them to collect past monies for things that they may or may not have done.
Okay, so I think additional cost incurred over and above of what we would normally pay
Under
for.
operations.
Yes.
It's my understanding and my thought that we wouldn't go to a lieutenant right away. We wait a year or two. I have a note here to make sure I brought that up, just so you know. So, we don't know how big the force will get in time. We don't know how big the town will get in time. But my thought is to bring a chief in right away to make the decisions, to put order in the house, if you will, and in time, bring in a lieutenant, whether that's a couple of years or further
Well, I
down
think
the
we need
road.
to look at the long-term costs of this, because I don't think we're going back to the state police system after we exit. And so I think if
No, I agree.
if the chief of police is going to be here for 20 years, we're going to have to pay a retirement package, long-term health benefits. I think there are a number of costs incurred that aren't immediately recognizable.
Indeed.
So if you could help us with that.
Absolutely, and I
think-
believe I probably have all that information already, and I can graft it together for you.
Because I think this state police officer came with a lot of things that we don't ordinarily think of
Right.
in
That is-
terms of equipment that we might not be aware of that we're going to have to provide.
Right.
So that would be helpful for us, I think, in making a decision. And if we go to this, we will will we keep our last our last part-time constable? Is that position going to go away?
Undetermined.
That's undetermined. Is the best term for it.
All right. Well, I think I have a couple of other questions, but I can forward those to you,
Okay.
because I hope you'll be coming back
Yes,
to report to us. again.
absolutely.
Okay, you'll be back by popular demand.
All right.
Mr. Salerno?
So a few questions. Are we going to need a parking authority, or whose authority is that going to go under? And that may not be necessarily directed at you.
The parking authority generally falls, actually, I think that would really go under Joe Burgo at this point. If you look at that.
Traffic
as
authority
far as
is-
the traffic, he's designated the traffic authority as of
Yeah.
now. That would probably fall under us. That's something we'd have
So
to
if you
look
write
at
tickets-
as far as.
Board of Selectmen is a traffic.
Yeah.
Okay, so is it adequate, right now, if you issue a parking ticket downtown,
No,
it's
no.
on a state road,
We don't
That
do
goes
that.
to the state, not to
it goes
us.
directly, but they do, I've seen them, that goes directly to the state.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to have some mechanism right here to handle that?
Authority is the entity that decides where to put a stop sign, how to control intersections.
Yep.
Yes.
Items such as that. The parking system is run differently from being the traffic authority. That's on the police side.
Correct, yes. So if we established, basically, the town of East Lyme, the PD used to have their own parking tickets years before my time here.
Okay.
So whether they're $5 or whatever the case, kind of like New Haven or some of the larger cities. So yes, we could absolutely implement that back. That part itself would fall under us.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to know how that would work.
Yes.
I know speeding tickets, as I mentioned, that still goes to the state, right?
We do get a percentage, maybe say it's $10 per, but it's only certain statutes that comes back to the town of East Lyme.
Even if it's on a town road?
Correct.
Okay. I am interested in what the recommendations are for building upgrades. I mean, I was there are some inadequacies. Storage is going to be an issue, as was mentioned. I'm also interested in, are we going to hear tonight about the police commission and what their charge is going to be, or is that something we're going to hear at the next?
It's in the ordinance that was given to you, and what their charges and what their responsibilities are.
Okay, because some of the questions, I think some of it will eventually, some of those questions that you asked would fall upon the police commission, is my understanding.
Right, they would decide these things.
I'd like to have that discussed at the next meeting in a little more detail.
About
The police
Police
commission.
police commission.
Yeah.
Well, we
Yes.
can talk about it tonight, too.
So I don't know if the attorney has any information on that, or how we would implement that. And
We're going to bring him up next. So
Okay, if
let's-
you're coming
let's
up next,
have-
perfect.
Let's have questions go to Sergeant Masick. Any other questions about
Yes.
the details of what we're going to do?
I do.
Mhm.
The secure records, I read that those must be accessible 24 hours a day. So we could not have those secure records off-site. In other words, we couldn't use a vault here at Town Hall.
We'd have to, I'd have to look into give you.
That's a legal question.
Statute specifics or for the attorney
It actually
itself.
is addressed here.
Yes.
We
Yes.
can have them off-site as long as they're available electronically, and that the town clerk can bring up the original document.
But that would mean, but then they would have to be available when someone was in the building. That's not 24
Elec-
hours.
Electronically, it can be kept off-site. There's some very intricate laws, very
Right.
So-
detailed
I
laws
think
on
that falls under the FOI where, say, if we have that front open, then somebody can come in and request a record as the administrative assistant was available that morning. I think there's a time frame given by the state library that it has to be available, so we could provide it
Right.
after that point.
Does it have to be a vault to be considered secure?
No,
It simply has to be a locked facility?
correct.
Correct.
Correct. If you walk into some of the area PDs, you have a dispatch window on one side and a records window on the other. You can see right through that records window where there's probably filing cabinet after filing cabinet of the records right there. They have the personnel that work in that room to provide the records. But that, again, that building is open at a later time compared to where we are now.
Thank you.
The only other question I have is, I know if we go to independent force, grant opportunities will be available
Yes.
to our town. I'd just be interested, when you come back, if you could give us an example of what some of those grant opportunities would
We
be.
have those tonight.
Yeah, well, do you have any examples of what those grant opportunities would be?
We have, currently right now, there's, through the Department of Justice, there's a grant that normally every other town has. I don't have in front of me, I do have a printout of what all the surrounding towns do get by that grant every year. We don't get it because we're under the state program. They take that money. So where Old Saybrook, for example, gets $19,000 towards equipment, we get zero because the state takes it. And it's actually in our contract that we're not allowed to apply for those specific grants because they apply for it on our behalf. There's equipment grants that we are not available to get right now, so possibly the APHIS machine, which is the fingerprint identification machine that we use, we could get some grant money for that. The current DUI grant that we get, because we are a resident trooper town, normally those are designated to smaller departments, so the funding is not as large here. So again, that's a cut in funding means a cut in shifts, so there's not as much enforcement out there. So that would up our enforcement. I've been to DOT headquarters many times for those grant workshops and speaking to them for that particular grant, so that would, a higher amount would be afforded to us for that. So there's just certain things by falling under this program that we are not eligible for. I can get you a direct list for the following meeting of exact grants.
Yeah,
that
if
I'm aware
there's
of.
something you already
As
have
it-
available, that would be
'cause
interesting.
I've met
As they
with Mayor-
stand today, and they change every year, and
Right.
some qualifications will
Yes.
fall out of and
Exactly.
fall into.
Also met with Mayor Finkelstein. He's provided me, since they've made the jump with what has now become available to them, so that's a great resource for us as well.
Okay.
Mr. Cunningham had something.
It might have just been answered. So, it looks like the Ledyard-Groton relationship would be a good model for us to look at
Yes.
with us and Waterford. And then with these MOUs, will we have access to look and maybe as a starting point, how Ledyard handled it with Groton for sharing their resources or utilizing their resources?
Yes, absolutely. We do have a copy of their current MOU between the two
Oh, we
towns.
do.
That's kind of what we've modeled our draft off of with Waterford, so yes, that would become available. It's only in draft version right now, but yes, we do have that.
Thank you.
Yeah, his 3-ring binder is quite thick. We've done all that. We talked to Ledyard. We looked at the relationship with Groton. When Ledyard went independent, they didn't have a police building yet, much like we're thinking about doing. Our space between going independent and getting a building might be a lot longer than Ledyard's. It might not be. But yes, there's a model that it works. If a Ledyard police officer pulls someone over tonight, they bring him over to the Groton jail. There's a per per charge, per prisoner charge that depends on how many hours and all that. But that is a model we've used. We used a lot of Ledyard's information. It was suggested early on by Mrs. Hardy, let's let someone else do it first, and we'll learn from them. And that was good, sage advice, and I thank you for that, because Ledyard probably had a few hiccups, and we've asked them what those were, and we've talked to them about that. So we feel very confident in that big 3-ring binder. We've crossed the T's, dotted the I's. Yeah, there's going to be some things that are just going to have to be discovered once we get into this. I think what Mr. Gardner brings in is we just got to do it for leadership, for supervision, for the liability reasons alone, and frankly for that leader in town who's going to interact and keep the town's best interests in mind. Doing this and knowing that we can do it for around the same money, because those numbers are going to change, and we don't know what the police commission and the Board of Finance will decide, because don't forget, all spending still goes through the Board of Finance. They can't jack this budget up a couple $100,000 while they're getting it approved through the appropriation process. Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, town meeting, a big item, it's a referendum. And for a town budget, a referendum. So,
And just to touch it, I mean, look at what we pay for resident trooper now. If it were 100%, if we're looking at $212,000. We can do a lot with that $212,000. We can accomplish a few large things that are in this to deal with the hiring of a chief.
Mr. Siri, you had a question?
I'm just going to point out that I know Mrs. Hardy brought up about paying a chief's retirement over 20 years. We do that with the resident trooper all the time anyway. Even if the resident trooper leaves, a new one comes in, we start picking up his retirement. So for the last several decades, we have been paying a retirement program for whoever's been, quote, the operational head of our department. So that's not going to change. In fact, it might go down. It's possible. So just want to make that point.
I was going to say that the chief nationally is a 4-year time frame. Connecticut may have a little bit longer for some of the chiefs that are here, but again, that's a fiscal thing. By putting out to the Chief Police Association, they'd be doing the ones that put out for the hiring, for bringing in that guy. He works off of his own contract. They may already have retirement benefits. That's something also we may not have to provide. Not retirement, but some of the health, medical things of that nature. Right now, I think it's $24,600. That could be a cost saving. If that person
If we brought in, say, a retired trooper or something, or a retired...
You just said a bad word.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't want to do that?
Yeah, we don't want to do that.
Oh.
We prefer not to do that.
I'm so naive when it comes to some of this stuff. Yeah, you cops got it, but... a
few of
retired
us-
police officer from somewhere has already done this and may have semi-retired, and now he's going... I
Correct,
understand.
yes.
Okay. Other questions from Mr. Masick, or Sergeant Masick, because I do want to get to the town attorney, who's just kind of got to go over how this process works. Any other questions?
Just one quick question. Is there any impact to our town insurance to this? It sounded like we're insuring the resident state troopers, so it would probably be cost neutral. Is it a cost neutral thing for
To
insurance?
the insurance, that's a
Is it-
question I'd have to probably come over here and ask. It's because you're talking about like the $1 million umbrella policy they have attached
Yeah,
to the
or because we're
contracts.
independent, is that treated held any different standard with insurance companies?
That's going to be statutorily
It's an
brought
interesting
up.
question,
Yeah, it is
and
a good
certainly
question.
a question we can ask, because every year we're shopping insurance anyway, so some companies are up and some are down. We are paying for liability insurance, malpractice, all the things that, and by the way, police officer insurance is very, very, very expensive. It's a significant chunk of the insurance we pay annually. We're paying that now. Does it get more expensive or less expensive if we go independent? I can investigate that and ask that question. It's a good question to have, Mr. Salerno. But more than the cost, it's the exposure of risk that's far more greater than whatever check we're writing. Yeah. The fact that, first of all, a state trooper, any of them, could come in this town, screw up, pardon my casualness, mess up, and we get sued.
Yes.
Yet we can't sue them. the exposure is large, it's dramatic, it's in our face. And now we've taken the genie out of the bottle. We can't put it back in. Now we kind of know that all the risks and exposure that we have of maybe inadequate leadership. Not to necessarily dismiss the fine resident state troopers we've had, but the relationship and what was pointed out pretty directly by Mr. Gardner.
Yeah.
We have a liability, we have an exposure, and we have a risk far greater than any check that we write to an insurance company. Mr. Gardner, you want to add to that? You got to get on microphone so those sitting on the couch between Red Sox.
Quickly, on that issue
Innings.
alone, I think the problem that the town faces, we don't have a documented program. Any investigation will look for the documented program. How are you managing the resources? What are the training programs? Those type of questions would be immediately apparent to anybody doing an investigation. Unless you have a documented program, as in the private industry, the public industry needs the same thing, to answer those questions to reduce or mitigate the risk. That's what they're looking for. How do you mitigate risk? And in order to do that, you need to have a documented program showing this is what you're doing.
Hence the operations manual, which is usually what the attorneys go after in a lawsuit immediately. Did the officer not follow policies and procedures?
Thank you.
Mr. Nicholson, could I request a 5-minute recess?
We're going to take how about a 4-minute recess?
Fine.
And then we'll have Attorney O'Connell come up and talk about the ordinance that we're asked to vote on.
This would be the one of those. It would be low on the total.
The mics are on. I'm going to ask you all to please find a seat. Finish up your conversations. Thank you all. Thank you all for your patience. That was longer than 5 minutes, though. Going to get better at that. We're back in session, if you will. This is the Board of Selectmen meeting, and we're partway through, or hopefully most of the way through, a discussion tonight on the independent police. Mr. O'Connell has worked hard. It brought tears to my eyes with this ordinance, with its brilliant prose. And first of all, it was commented, before I go to Mr. O'Connell, Attorney O'Connell, it was brought up several times in the audience tonight that Mr. Gardner should run for president.
Write him in.
It's not too late, Tom. So, and I would agree, and you would get my vote. So, thank you. Thank you again to the committee. Mr. O'Connell, before us is a ordinance, and this is the whole process of what we're here to do. To swing over to an independent police force, we need an ordinance, because there's things in our current ordinances that need to be abolished and refitted with this. So if you could kind of review what's been put in front of us.
Sure. The first thing we had to decide was how an organized municipal police department is formed. And the formation of an organized municipal police department is governed by the Connecticut General Statutes, particularly Chapter 104, Part 1. That starts with Section 7-274 and goes through 7-294. Contains various statutes pertaining to police. Now, the town's existing ordinance recognizes this fact. The ordinance that we're presently operating under is the amended ordinance concerning terms of appointment and qualification of constables. And that provides that the terms of appointed constables shall terminate, quote, when the town establishes a police department in accordance with the provisions of Chapter 104, Part 1 of the Connecticut General Statutes. So they tell us how we have to do this, right in the ordinance establishing constables. Now, this has not been the first time this had to be looked at by the courts. In the case called Ganeski versus East Lyme, the Connecticut Supreme Court had an opportunity to interpret this provision, and it held that this language can be no plainer indication that the town is aware of the distinction between a police department and a constabulary, and knows that the continued employment of constables will not be appropriate if and when it decides to establish a police department. So we have a dividing line there. And as a matter of fact, your police chief's report, I noticed they cited the same language on page 13 of their report, and they honed in on that very same provision and underlined it and highlighted it. So everyone seems to have gotten to that point. Now, towns are not required to establish an organized